Hi everyone, I'm Brett Hancock. Before I get into this little video segment where I start trying to, in some ways, illustrate the importance of participles and how the Greeks used and loved participles, it is reflected even in the New Testament. Ancient Greek is referred to as a participle-loving language, and so basically, a participle is basically I guess that's where the word comes from, participates between adjectives and verbs. So the basis of it is a verb. And if you're kind of starting to get the idea that Greek being what's called an inflected language, where both the prefixes and suffixes and they kind of morph, and even the base stem of words, definitely in the case of verbs, can morph or change to reflect certain grammatical information that with non-inflected languages like English, we need word position to know, hey, okay, this first noun that shows up in the sentence, oh, that's our subject. And then after that, the verb always falls. And then after that, the object or direct object or indirect object or whatever. That's kind of how English is. Word position is really important. In Greek, not so much. I mean, if you're using prepositional phrases, oh, okay, your preposition is going to come first. If there's an article, it'll come after. And then, for your object of the preposition, which is a noun. A prepositional phrase, word position in Greek is like English in that way. But if you treat that as a full unit and you kind of move it around in a sentence, I mean, Greek kind of uses word position for various things. Like what shows up in the sentence typically is what's more emphatic or what's more emphasized. So it doesn't use word position to identify that, oh, the first noun is the subject, oh, the one that comes after the verb, oh, that's the object, like English does. Inflected language, whether it's Hebrew or Latin, also those two other inflected languages, again, they use prefixes, suffixes, various, morphing of the of diphthongs and vowels and consonants to illustrate certain grammatical constructs, certain grammatical information. So that's basically a participle. It's part adjective, part verb, and so what I want to do in this video is not really go so much into that kind of stuff, which we'll get into a little bit later on as we get into participles. But I just kind of wanted to illustrate, why is it called a participle-loving language? Maybe you've heard that phrase, or what is this? It seems like I think I've heard something. I don't know what a participle is, but I've heard, there's a whole lot of them in the New Testament. Or even if you're not aware of that, well, I'm making you aware of that. It is referred to as a participle-loving language because there's a lot of participles in there. So what I wanted to do is just basically show you some numbers, show some stats, and what that is. Now, one thing that I'm going to get into that I didn't mention is I start showing, I start picking different, and I just stick with the Gospels. I show a little bit from Matthew, a little bit from Mark, a little bit from, I start with John, and a little bit from Luke, and then John. Again, I start with John. But basically, I just kind of pick some chapters that have a lot of participles, and I start showing, okay, how many do we have present tense? How many do we have aorist? How many do we have that are perfect tense? For all the voices, active voice, middle voice, passive voice. And if that doesn't mean anything to you at this point, don't worry about it. But it's breaking it down into all the, the components of participles and stuff. So I just wanted to illustrate that. I don't know where you're at in your Greek journey right now. You're probably not into participles yet. Maybe you'll find this video a little bit helpful, just as a prelude to something coming up down the road, or maybe it's something like you put on your to read list, or your to view list, I should say, as we're talking about videos. Later on, you'll look at it, whatever the case may be, or you'll review it later. You kind of get an overview right now, whatever the case may be. But yeah, right now, what I wanted to do on the channel is keep the videos a little more simpler. I'm not starting like Angela did on her channel, Alpha with Angela, great channel. She's starting from the very beginning. She's teaching the alphabet, the Greek alphabet, and kind of ground up. Once you kind of have already learned the alphabet and you kind of got a little momentum there, whatever, that's where my videos kind of come in. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel and kind of repeat what she's doing. I want to kind of just give, like, somebody's learned how to ride a bike. Okay, let's give you a racetrack so that you can go actually practice riding the bike. I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I don't know how good that metaphor is, um, but I'm sure you get the idea. So I just want to like practice exercises. It's sort of like, you're in a class, professor's giving a lecture, and then, it's a science class, let's say, and it's like, hey, let's go to the lab. Let's get some hands-on for all this theory I just threw at you. Let's get some hands-on. So I know Angela on her channel has a lot of that, but I want to do that as well, of various types. So I'm coming at it from some different angles than what she is in some regards. And then I do want to give credit to where both of us have springboarded from, and that is from the amazing Hebrew channel that some of you probably maybe are taking, Hebrew from them as well, but it's the channel called, Aleph with Beth. And so it's basically, the idea on the channel is, Abraham or Abram, with Bethany, with Beth. And, it's this amazing couple where they started this channel. Same approach that Angela is repeating, that starts from the ground up, little by little, teaching the Aleph-Bet, which is the Hebrew alphabet. And then very early on, kind of mimicking how they have a whole methodology. They have a website that they kind of describe how their methodology works. And they're trying to get a lot of that stuff translated in different languages, and they already have. Anyway, it's an amazing channel. Aleph with Beth on YouTube. If you haven't checked that out to learn biblical Hebrew, it's amazing. So yeah, we're kind of trying to all do this same sort of goal, is get people studying these languages. Now, I'm probably in my channel going to use a little bit more English sometimes than maybe they are. They're not really using English at all. They're using the target language only. I want to use a lot of the target language. I mean, definitely Angela and I some of our Greek career journey has been, that we both went to Polis Institute in Jerusalem, which is an amazing school, where the methodology is treating the language like you would any other language as a quote unquote living language. And it's an immersive process. You go in there just like a child does. They start learning their native language. They're just immersed in the environment where they start to figure out, how the language works and stuff. And very quickly, it's amazing how babies and toddlers, I should say toddlers, start learning the language very quickly. 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, like, just amazing. So it's kind of modeled after that idea. And so I want to mix a little bit of that, a little bit with the traditional methods together. But I do want to stay a lot with the target language. So those scattered around the world that don't even know English, which if they don't know English, they probably won't be able to enjoy this video. But yeah. So anyway, so this is, again, meant to be a little bit of a prelude to kind of just, create some appetite for learning participles, which is coming down the road. But like I said, I'm going to be sticking with more present tense, simple. The indicative mood is just the simple. This is the factual mood of a verb, where it's like when we make a sentence, we need a verb, we need a subject, and that's all we need, really. But if we want to add more color to the language, to the sentence, we want to definitely sprinkle in some adjectives, maybe some adverbs, to kind of describe how the action is happening, adjectives to kind of a little more color to the noun. And then we throw in some prepositional phrases that'll kind of do similar sort of thing to how the subject and the verb, the action are working together. And it gives more color, gives more information to kind of just fill the sentence up, to really convey a more clearer thought of what the speaker or what the writer is conveying. And so yeah, we'll get there. We'll get into prepositions more and stuff. So I've got some of that scattered in some of my videos, and so I'm trying to pretty much stay with the target language. So, but for right now, like I said, I'm trying to keep it real simple. Present tense, indicative mood, just keep it simple. Then we'll get into the aorist mood, which if the mood is indicative, if you have the aorist and the indicative mood, every verb has tense, mood, and voice. And so the voice doesn't matter for what I'm about to say, but the tense and the mood does. If it's aorist, tense, and indicative mood, then you've got the simple past tense. And so we'll get into that pretty soon, probably within the coming weeks or a month or something or whatever. Probably within the coming weeks. but further downstream we'll get into participles. But this is just meant to be kind of a little bit of an introduction into that. So, so yeah, I mean, why are there so many participles in the New Testament? That's what this is about. And and like I already mentioned, it is said in the New Testament that Koine Greek is a participle loving language and stuff. So, so yeah, let's get into the main thrust of what I was doing. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Hancock, and so here I am doing a video, another Koine Greek video discussing participles. And I guess what I want to just impress upon my listeners here is just how important participles are in the Greek New Testament. Many teachers of Koine Greek have often said that Greek is a participle-loving language because it makes such extensive use of them, particularly for our interests in the Greek New Testament, but just in general in the ancient Greek language. I mean, it was used pretty extensively. And so two main key ways, I guess we can kind of separate them into two groups. One would be adjectival versus the other one would be adverbial. The adjectival ones, in the same way that adjective behaves grammatically, its role in the sentence, it typically describes nouns. So if we use a participle, basically we start with a verb, we make it into a participle, and then we use it to basically behave like an adjective. That's an adjectival participle. So, and then as you break that down, there's two basic ways where it actually is acting adjective, or it's acting substantively, excuse me. And what that means, that big long word, what that means is basically where it's basically behaving as a noun, because there isn't a noun in this little context, and it's behaving as the noun, despite the fact that it's actually a participle, and it's an adjectival participle. So, but it's behaving as a noun. So one example would be just as adjectives. I don't know. Let's say the blue house, or the blue house. So if we take away the word house and we just say the blue, well, in English we'd probably say the blue one. And if you had the context and you know it was just talking about the house, well, when you see this adjectival participle, and it must have the article with it, then oh, okay, well, yeah, this is adjectival participle acting substantively, behaving as the noun. So we would say, the blue one basically is probably a simple starter translation for that. And then adverbial participles, they basically act like adverbs. So how do adverbs behave in a sentence? I mean, they typically are describing the action of the verb, right? Whatever the action of the verb is. So let's say if John runs and we want to know how John runs, then we throw in an adverb typically, right, in an English sentence. So so if he runs quickly, then quickly would be the adverb. And if we now put a participle in there to function in that same way to describe how he's running, then that would be an adverbial participle. So there you go. So yeah, I just thought we'd look at some stats here to get a feel for why Greek is such a participle-loving language. This is a blog that Dr. Wayne Slusser did. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Hope so. Back, a decade ago, February of 2011. Says how important are participles in Greek, and he said, well, let's look at it from this point of view. He said, let's look at the frequency figures, or at least some frequency figures of occurrence in the Greek New Testament to give you some ideas. So he used some software. I don't know if it was Logos or some other software to kind of run some queries to kind of come up with these stats. But he came up with 6 participles in one verse. He just found one occurrence of that. And then he dropped it down to 5 participles in one verse. He found 15, and here's the ones he found. So there's 15 participles in each of these verses, and they would be used either adjectivally or adverbially in each one of these. He found 4 participles in one verse. He found 100 occurrences of that, or in one verse there's 4 participles, and then in one verse 3 participles. He found 398 participles, or 398 occurrences of that in the New Testament, again, where you have one verse and has 3 participles. And then here we have 1218 verses, and or 1218 occurrences or verses, where in that one verse there's 2 participles. So like he's saying, you basically double that number because there's 2 participles, and he's saying there's 2436 participles in basically, so 1218 verses that have 2 participles each. So I don't know why he put that, but that could be confusing. But anyway, and it's like, how about 1 participle in a verse? How often does that occur? So he said 2556. So the little queries he did using this fancy schmancy software, that's what he found out. So it's pretty prevalent in the New Testament. It's rightly said, if we don't really understand participles, we're going to have a really hard time reading our New Testament in Greek. So there's a lot to learn to Greek, but if we don't really understand participles, can't recognize them, then we're not really going to be able to read it that way. He found, so in Apocrypha, in 2nd Maccabees, historic book of the Jews, the history of the Jews, in 1st and 2nd Maccabees, a few hundred years before Jesus arrived, we found 9 participles in this verse. So that's pretty impressive. So he was using accordance software. That's what he was doing. If you want to look this up online, he kind of goes into, on page 2, how he did his query, how he did his search. If you have accordance software, you could look into that. So the other thing I thought I would do, what I did was I did a search myself using BibleHub.com to find out how many occurrences, and just in the 4 Gospels, and I just picked some different chapters. So I started out with John. I was like, let's check John chapter 1. How many participles do I find? I found 37 participles in chapter 1, and then 202 verbs. So the ratio of that, about 18%, right? So you can see predominantly the present tense participles in that chapter. Chapter 2, not as many. It's a smaller chapter, but still 13.4%. So there's 82 verbs and 11 participles ratio, from 11 to 82, 13 participles to verb ratio there. But predominantly present tense verbs. So that's 1st and 2nd John. So we go down there. I just started looking from there. It's like, what seems to be one of the bigger chapters in the Gospel of John? Looks like chapter 6. So I say, let's take a look at that. So here you can see predominantly 33 present tense participles. Aorist, kind of close. As far as perfect, these are perfect participles. The perfect participle to active voice versus middle passive voice. This is kind of the nomenclature that's used out there in the community. I know Bible Hub uses it, but it's not exclusive to Bible Hub. It's pretty much a convention that's used out there for describing verbs, where first it says verb, and then it'll say R for perfect, or it could say P for present tense, or A for aorist, and then I for indicative mood. It would be P if it's participle. So this is basically tense, mood, voice. So A for active voice, it's kind of thing. So that's what we got here. So a reasonable number of perfect participles in that particular chapter. So again, 59 to 280, so 21% in the ratio of participles to verbs in that chapter, in chapter 6. So that's Gospel of John. Okay, so I looked at what seems to be one of the bigger chapters in Mark. It seems like Mark chapter 14 is. Okay, let's take a look at that. And again, total participles 58 to a ratio of verbs 19.6. So it's pretty. This is just something that seems sensible to me, is to compare it to the number of verbs. There's all kinds of ways of looking at this. If you just look at absolute numbers, there's 58 participles in that chapter. Absolute numbers, here's 59 participles in John chapter 6. So, and then here, Luke chapter 1, there's 44. and 224 verbs. You can see still predominantly present tense. It seems to be pretty much the most common. Now here, this chapter here, Luke 22, there's a lot. It's kind of a little atypical. There's a lot of aorist participles here. There's 29, or 20, actually 32. There's middle and passive here, active, middle, passive voices. So we got 32. Here we have 37, so that's pretty close to being as many as present tense. So that's kind of atypical. But yeah, 75 total participles. The ratio of that to number of verbs, 28% for that ratio of participles to verbs. And then we jump down to the Gospel of Matthew, and I just looked, looks like Matthew 26 is one of the bigger chapters. So yeah, so we got 30 present tense, and we've got more aorist. Look at that. So we've got 40 total aorist participles. So yeah, there's a lot of verbs, more verbs. Most of the verbs in all these other ones were in the 200 range. Here we actually cross over 309 verbs and 73 participles. So we still got a pretty decent ratio, 23 to 0.6. So almost 24% of participles ratio to verbs. So anyway, so there's some stats. Just wanted to share with you. Participles are really important. It's going to be really hard to read your New Testament without it. Yeah, like just for instance, I'm sorry, let's get rid of this stuff here. Well, actually, I guess I could use that pen. Yeah, grab that pen. And purple. We'll use purple, why not? And yeah, blue's already on the page. So if we start reading right away, okay, kaya ganito, hoti etelesen ho Jesus, pantas tus logos, tutus, epentois mataitai sao tu. So, and it happened when Jesus had finished all these words, he said to his disciples, right? So far, no participles. Okay. You get down here, and oidete hoti metaduos hemeras to pascha genetai. You know that after 2 days, that Passover will begin or is beginning. So still no participles. Kai ho huios tu anthropu paradidotai estarotenai. So, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Still no participles, but let's just take a look. Just glance over this with a little aerial view here. Yeah, so far I haven't used my purple pen here. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, okay, here we go. Here's a participle. And yeah, you can see down here ppm. So there's, if you start to learn this nomenclature right here, the middle P in the position of mood, so present, then the mood is participle, and then middle passive voice. So you can see right there, as soon as you see P, like AP or PP or RP, you know the second P, that's a participle. So if you're using Bible Hub, you know that can help you to identify them. I mean, what I did basically is just did a search, and so you could just do, if we wanted to find this one right here, just PPMP, yeah. And if I want to go to another one, I could just, do that. It'll jump down to another one. So anyway, there we go. Yeah, I think that was all of them, or all of that one anyway. But yeah, I mean, here's another participle. Some chapters have more than others. Now this would be the apolutos genike, how you say it in Greek, grammatical term for the genitive absolute, that particular flavor of participle. So basically, Jesus, having been, and yeah, so yeah, my, it's kind of a little bit like Amy Eston, but it's kind of like to become, or sometimes it could be like the idea of coming to pass or something. So, but basically, him having been, or him being in Bethany, Bethania. So him having been in Bethany. And then when you use the genitive absolute, then you switch. You're using it because the subject of this particular clause, which involves a noun and a participle, the subject of that is going to be different than over here. So when we go over here, we'd expect a different subject. So, well, actually over here, sorry, because this is just a prepositional phrase. Enoikia Simonos, so in the house of Simon, the leper, right? So yeah, that's just prepositional phrase. But here, when we come here, it's gonna be a different part or a different subject. So from this clause to this clause, different subjects. Oh, okay. So the Greeks invented this genitive absolute approach where they would put the participle and the subject of that participle in the genitive case. So anyway, enough of that. Purpose of this video was pretty much to give you a little glimpse on the importance of participles. Yeah, some of these sentences here I'm looking at is not showing them so much, but let's see. This is Matthew 26. This is where we looked at those stats for Matthew 26 anyway, which was this is a total 73 participles in this total chapter. So it's quite a few. Again, just present tense 21, and so yeah, when I did this, if I go PPA. 21, that's what we find. So we could just flip to them here. So we're using echo, to have into a feminine version participle there, present tense participle. Here's Lego, turn it into a participle. It's plural, and it's present tense, legontes. Legontes. So anyway, you get the idea. Estio, to eat, turn into a participle in the plural genitive. Yeah. So here we go. Now here would be the case of a adjectival type participle. So we get the article ho paradidus, the one betraying him, and then of course the kind of the object of the participle here. So yeah, the object is what the action is acting upon, right? So the one, so the one betraying him, so who's being betrayed, here's the direct object basically of the participle. So this is because it's got the article, it's kind of a alert that it can't possibly be in adverbial, it's got to be adjectival. So there you go. So the one betraying him basically. So anyway, you get the idea. Yeah, my intent here was pretty much just to illustrate the importance of participles, and yeah, God bless y'all.